Welcome back, my friends. Today, let's do another dedicated question and answer video. Once a month on the community tab, my YouTube channel, I'll put out a question prompt such as this one. Down below, you can ask me anything about anything. Thumbs up the questions you want me to respond to. I'll answer as many as I can today. The cutoff for this video was 50 thumbs up. So the most liked question was from Awesome HPT. He or she asks this: what do you think will happen if Kadyrov dies? Smooth transition, power struggle, or Chechen uprising? I feel like a week ago this was a bigger news story, but something is definitely not right with Kadyrov. This is what the Chechen leader looked like 2 years ago, and this is what he looks like today. This man is aged, it looks like 20 years in the last 2 years. Speculation is that he has renal failure, there's something wrong with his kidneys. Potentially somebody has been poisoning him, and he's been poisoned numerous times. And the thought is that he was dying or dead in a Moscow hospital. Kadyrov then released this video saying that he went to Moscow and he was at this hospital to visit his dying uncle. Is any of this true? And I don't know, and I don't really care. My personal opinion, just my opinion, is that Chechnya is more or less irrelevant to this war. The Kadyrov clan controls this territory, and they're kind of exempt from military conscription. Kadyrov has his own private army of Chechens, and they're not even in Ukraine currently. They go back and forth between the war zone, but aside from filming TikToks, they don't really contribute to the war. And Chechnya is not that big of a location, 1.3 million. So even if Kadyrov died, and there was a power struggle for this region, I think Russia would just ignore it until the war in Ukraine was over, and then they would get Chechnya in order. But if Chechnya wants to declare independence, would it have any impact on the war in Ukraine? And I don't think it would. The bigger variable that people should really be thinking about is what happens to Alexander Lukashenko. This is more interesting to me. The population of Belarus being 9.3 million, given their proximity and shared borders with so many NATO countries. To me, it's more interesting is what happens if something happens to Lukashenko? That would be an interesting development, I think, for the war in Ukraine. Next question. Do you think Musk's reckless behavior will eventually catch up to him? From SEC violations, manipulating and profiting from Dogecoin, all the way to meddling in Europe's largest war since World War II, he seems to be untouchable. And yes, Elon Musk is untouchable. The United States has oligarchs too. If you're a billionaire in the United States, you have a lot of power, you have a lot of say. All members of Congress will answer that phone call and talk to you. And Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. And what he's done the last decade is try to brand himself as an anti-oligarch. Somebody looking out for and protecting the small guy against those evil, conspiracy, shadow government people like George Soros. He talks about George Soros on Twitter a lot. He knows this gets people excited and this draws people to his companies and ideas. But George Soros only has $6.7 billion. Elon Musk has $250 billion. Elon Musk, this is objectively measurable, is like 40 times more powerful than George Soros. So yes, Elon can tip the scales, he can throw his money around, he can move governments and bureaucracy and politicians, and he's not that old, he's only 52 years. So unfortunately, Elon Musk is never going away, and he's never going to shut up. The reason why Elon Musk is a little weird is because he has Asperger's syndrome. He's admitted to this and talked a lot about how much he struggled during his childhood because people with Asperger's, it's on the autistic spectrum. If you've never met somebody with Asperger's, they are very interesting individuals. I've known 3 in my lifetime. And if you have Asperger's, this is a neurodevelopment condition characterized by significant difficulties in social interaction and nonverbal communication. People with Asperger's don't really understand humor, but they know humor is important to building friendships and relationships, so they often put in a lot of time and effort to try and be funny when they're not that funny. And they suck at picking up on nonverbal communication when maybe they're standing too close to you or they're making you feel uncomfortable. But people with Asperger's are often highly intelligent, highly focused on single issues or hobbies. This has helped Elon achieve a lot of success in all of his technological companies. But now that Elon has made it, richest man in the world, he can do whatever he wants, I don't think he's a force for good. I think he's a force for Elon. I think he wants to do whatever he wants to do, and the dude seems to have a prerogative to create a lot of progeny. He wants to have a lot of kids. How many kids does Elon Musk have currently? We don't really know. The number's at 11. Here's a YouTube video I'll link down below, which is fascinating. Elon Musk family tree. And this is pretty messed up. This is a tough video to get through, given that his biological father divorced his mom, remarried another woman. She had a kid from a previous marriage, and now his father is dating or sleeping with and having children with his own stepdaughter. I'm not pinning on Elon anything his father does, but it's a very messed up family tree. And I don't think Elon and the Musks are going anywhere anytime soon. Unfortunately, with the wealth that this family has accumulated, they're now a new permanent fixture in global politics. All of Elon's children, he's probably going to have 50 to 100 by the time he dies, all of his children will be billionaires. And all of his children will probably want to be involved in politics and social media and pop culture, and this is something the entire world is just going to have to put up with for the rest of our lives. Next question. How likely do you think it is that Trump will be re-elected next year? Knowing his attitude towards both Putin and NATO, do you also think it would lead to America abandoning Ukraine to the Russians? So I'm going to talk numbers here. I know there are Republican voters who watch my videos, but just being objective, I'm trying to be as neutral as possible here. There's a 0% chance Donald Trump, if the nominee, will win the general election in 2024. And all you have to do is look at the numbers. In 2016, against Hillary Clinton, Trump lost the popular vote by almost 3 million votes. He won the Electoral College. Those are the rules. At the time, Trump said he moneyballed the correct states, and he won the election fair and square by allocating resources to win the Electoral College. Brilliant. But he still lost the popular votes. Then, in 2020, against Joe Biden, he lost the popular vote again by a wider majority. 7 million votes this time. So he went from losing by 3 to losing by 7. And in 2020, he had the benefit and power of being the incumbent. He was holding the office of the presidency, which generally gives you an advantage. So now he's back to being an outsider, and he's running against Biden, who's now the incumbent. My prediction is if that Trump runs again and is the nominee, and it's Joe Biden again, he's probably going to lose by 10 million votes. And Trump is just a vote turning out machine, both for him and against him. The people that love him really love him. The people who hate him really hate him. And you can see this in the vote turnouts from 2016. Hillary Clinton got 65 million votes. Trump got 62. Versus 4 years later, 74 million versus 81 million. Joe Biden got 16 million more votes than Hillary Clinton. Those 16 million people were people who didn't vote in 2016 because they didn't care, but they wanted to show up to vote against Trump. Trump's negatives are just too high with Democratic voters who only occasionally vote. If he's the nominee, they will show up, they will, plug their nose, vote for Joe Biden just to stop Trump. Here's my declaration. If you're a Republican primary voter, my opinion is that Donald Trump is the only Republican nominee who can lose to Joe Biden. Joe Biden is such a weak candidate, I'm just being honest here, that if anyone else was the Republican nominee, they would probably win the general election. But because Trump has spent the last 8 years endearing himself to the Republican base, I think his eventual nomination is inevitable. When you look at his primary polling numbers, he doesn't even need a majority in order to pick up all the delegates. He just needs like 30 or 35%. So unless these other candidates drop out and consolidate around DeSantis or Pence or Christie or Nikki Haley or whoever, Trump's the nominee. And it's Joe Biden versus Donald Trump again. And Trump's going to lose the popular vote and the Electoral College by 10 million votes. It's my prediction. Hi Jake, not so much a question but a request. Several weeks ago you highlighted a company that was still doing business in Russia. I think it was Unilever. I would like to see you bring this back to your normal update videos on a regular basis. I appreciate the work you do. It was Unilever. I saw a post on Twitter that was getting some traction. I just wanted to use my platform to amplify that message. Unilever saw it. Unilever got the letters, the calls, the tweets, the posts, and they're still choosing to do business in Russia. They don't care. There is a website called leave-russia.org that tracks all of these companies still doing business in Russia, how much business they're still doing. Given how difficult it is to operate in Russia, a lot of companies, there's the good ones that completely pulled out. Some scaled back, some rebranded, and some are still doing business like normal, like Philip Morris. But there's just a depressing number of Western companies like Pepsi and Procter & Gamble and Nestle and Mondelez, Unilever, that are still doing business in Russia. They don't care about the war, they don't care about Ukraine. And at the end of the day, that's just capitalism. The goal of capitalism is to maximize profits regardless of the humanitarian or environmental costs. Capitalism has done a lot of good in the world. I'm a capitalist, but the executives at these companies are only thinking about their shareholders and also their employees and making a profit. I think rather than trying to organize boycotts that don't work against large conglomerates like Unilever, the better option is just to make doing business in Russia unprofitable. The fact that the economic environment in Russia could deteriorate and get so worse, these companies say we can't even operate at a profit in Russia anymore. We're going to pull out to save money rather than we were given pressure from ordinary people on the internet. So when there's a big movement happening, I want to amplify, I want to contribute to that chorus of voices, but how effective is it? And if I'm being honest with you guys, Unilever doesn't care, Procter & Gamble doesn't care, Pepsi doesn't care. Next question, just a hypothetical. How much do you think Russia and Putin will have to lose before they pull out of Ukraine. Love the work you do, Jake. Thank you for keeping us informed. So these are two different entities. There's Russia. How much are the Russian people willing to lose? And then there's Putin. And Putin's never going to stop. He's fully committed. He knows his life, his legacy, his life's work is dependent on succeeding in this war. And he doesn't care how many Russian soldiers die. If it's 500,000, 1 million, 2 million, 10 million. You know, the Soviet Union lost like 26 million soldiers during World War II, but they won. So Putin is in the same mindset, where he will continue this war and keep sending Russian people to die until he wins. He doesn't care about the lives, he cares about his legacy. So the question is, how long before the Russian people break and say they don't want to be used as cannon fodder, they don't want to be soldiers, they don't want to deploy to somebody else's country in order to subjugate their people? I'm hoping that breaking point comes soon. That would be beneficial, definitely, to Ukraine. Have you considered traveling to Ukraine to meet some of the people you spotlight? Any chance Ben Hodges would agree to be interviewed again? Love the Jack Russell Terrier, intelligent breed, not unlike the humans it works with. So General Ben Hodges, I could ask him to appear on another podcast. I interviewed him almost a year ago, so I do think I want to have him back again. A former, was he a 4-star general, 2-star general? But yeah, he's a wealth of resources, and I think he's been an amazing voice in support of Ukraine the last year and a half. As for traveling to Ukraine, this is something I plan to do and would love to do, but given that I live in the United States and I want to make these videos for you every other day, I'm going to wait for the war to end and for news to slow down before I take like a 2-week vacation and I can go spend proper time in Ukraine and enjoy myself. May glory and victory be with Ukraine. Jake, what do you think it would take for NATO to get involved in the war other than a chemical, biological, or nuclear weapon? I mean, that's really it. So with chemical weapons, more or less Russia already uses certain kinds of chemical weapons. They don't use the nastier stuff because it, at scale on a battlefield, dissipates too fast. It doesn't make sense. Biological weapons, true biological weapons, are suicide for Russia because viruses don't care if you're Russian or Ukrainian. They go everywhere. And Russia can't use nukes. I've talked about this extensively. And if they were to use a nuke, NATO would get involved. Beyond that, Russia has to deliberately attack NATO in order for NATO to respond or get involved. Yes, missiles have landed in Poland, drones have landed in Romania. That's been accidental, more or less, with no serious consequences, but if Russia were to bomb Berlin or London, yes, NATO would respond. When Ukraine finally has the F-16 in play on the battlefield, how effective do you think they will be in recovering the occupied territory? Should we expect this to play out in the spring offensive for 2024? So I'm actually not an expert on the F-16 or aircraft. All I can do is listen to Ukrainian pilots that really want F-16s, and the component that they're most interested in, that they most want, is the radar system in the F-16. This is the AN/APG-68 pulse Doppler radar that can detect enemy aircraft up to 296 kilometers away. This is made by Northrop Grumman. And this is the ultimate advantage. This what gets Ukrainian pilots so excited about F-16s, is if they can spot Soviet MiGs or helicopters before they're spotted, they can launch a missile in order to neutralize that enemy aircraft. So this is going to be the biggest game change, because what the Ukrainians are currently flying, they're radars kind of suck. So once they have this, they'll have the air advantage in the skies. They can then safely fly combat missions to drop ordnance on enemy tanks and enemy positions. It'll be a slow, gradual grinding advantage in the sky once F-16s arrive, but I'm excited. I think this is going to make a huge difference on the battlefield next spring. I wonder if Russia as a country can survive economically if this war lasts years. And how long could they drag the war out? I think Jake has the knowledge to give some insight into this. So 7 months ago on my YouTube channel, I made this video, Why Has Russia Not Collapsed Yet? Everything I stated in this video, I still believe to be accurate. And the summary is, unfortunately, Russia is food independent. They can grow enough food to feed their entire population. And they're energy independent. They can pump enough oil and gas to keep the lights on and continue feeding their war machine. So if you're food secure and energy secure, it's really hard to crack you. But the Russians are quite incompetent. I do think they're going to mess this up. I do think Russia's economy is going to take a sharp nosedive once the global economy slows down, which hasn't happened yet. We're not in recession here in North America. The American consumer is still strong. They're still spending. This is still keeping demand for raw commodities and energy high. But there is going to be an inflection point sometime soon. In the United States, central bank interest rates work as gravity. So this is the federal funds effective rate. And the United States Federal Reserve has been aggressively raising interest rates since February of 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. Interest rates currently are at 5.33. This is making it more difficult and more expensive to borrow money. If people borrow less money, people spend less money. If people spend less money, the global economy will slow down. So there's a couple of charts I can quick hit you with. This is the 30-year fixed rate mortgage average in the United States. And if we go back in time to COVID, mortgage rates were at 2.65%. Currently, they're above 7%. This is making it very difficult to afford a mortgage for a very expensive home, which means people aren't buying homes. The housing market is finally starting to slow down a little bit. Home prices have to come down with elevated interest rates for people to afford homes. If people don't want to cash out, refinance the equity in their homes, they don't want to do this when interest rates are at 7%. They want to do this when it's at 2%. So there's just less money, less equity in people's homes being pulled out in order to invest or spend in the economy. This is also going to slow things down. This chart is the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. Quantitative easing is when the Federal Reserve prints money out of nothing in order to buy U.S. Treasury debt. When the Fed buys Treasury debt, sorry, this is very technical. When the Fed buys Treasury debt, it lowers the yield rate and forces investors to go to other asset classes to get a higher return. So when bond yields are low, people put their money in crypto, they put their money in real estate, they put their money in the stock markets. This propels economic growth in the economy. But the Fed has been aggressively letting all of their bonds mature and roll off. You can see that this spike here was the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, but it's been going down, meaning the money supply is contracting, and this is causing Treasury yields to go up. People get excited when Treasury yields get close to 5%. You can buy U.S. government debt and you don't have to worry about the stock market or the real estate market. You can get your guaranteed 4.4 on a 10-year Treasury bond. So the U.S.'s national debt sucks money out of the economy. When the government borrows so much, that's money that isn't going into the stock market or the real estate market. So this is also contributing to a slowdown. Where I'm going with this is that once the United States goes into recession, I think it's going to happen early next year. This is going to put economic strain on China, Iran, Russia, Belarus, and we'll see how strong their economies really are when that happens. Poland and Ukraine have a bit of tension about allowing Ukrainian grain to be imported into Poland, and it seems to be threatening support to Ukraine. What are your thoughts and or suggestions on this incident? So I've actually not mentioned this in a video because I don't think it's a big deal. I'm not an expert on Polish politics. I could be wrong, but my impression is that parliamentary elections in Poland are coming up on October 15th. All Polish elected officials up for re-election are just being very sensitive to their voters. Farmers are very concerned about the price they're getting for their agricultural goods. That's why they're trying to block Ukrainian grain from being sold in Poland. But in my opinion, once these parliamentary elections are over, the conflict between Ukraine and Poland will be over as well. Once politicians aren't up for re-election, they're not paying as close attention to their voters, and I think everyone in Poland knows that their long-term survival and strategic security depends on Ukraine winning this war. And even if Poland says they don't want to donate any more weapons, they're done, Poland has delivered 325 tanks out of the combined 575 from all of the Western countries. They've donated jets, helicopters, they've done training, they're still doing maintenance. They've opened their border to millions of refugees. I don't think anyone should ever level any criticism at Poland. Pound for pound, given the size of their economy, nobody has done more for Ukraine than Poland. So if there's still tension between the two nations after October 15th, then I'll talk about it. But until then, I think this is going to blow over. Hi Jake, do you have any news on Roman? I hope he is better. Anything anyone can do for him. So Roman doesn't post on Twitter anymore. He doesn't post videos, so nothing goes viral. And the only thing Roman really still stays active on is Instagram. So if you want to catch up with Roman and see his stories, he does post stories daily on Instagram. You can follow him. And Roman suffered a head concussion in the war zone, and he's been trying to recover from it. He still occasionally gets tremors in his right hands, which prevents him from going back to the front lines as a sniper. I'm sure he's still doing what he can while in recovery, living in Kyiv, but he can't be medically cleared to go back to the front lines unless he can stop the tremors in his hand. I would like to ask you, during your time stationed as a missile operator in the military, did you ever experience UFOs or UAPs near the military base? Were they coming by just to check things out? So in my time as a missileer, unfortunately no, I never had any close encounters with the third kind. I never saw any UFOs or UAPs in the night sky, but back in the 50s and 60s, it was incredibly common for missileers at nuclear sites to see UFOs and UAPs over the nuclear silos. Nearly 6 decades after seminal Montana UFO incidents, Air Force vets are finally briefing the Pentagon. Given the momentum in the last 4 or 5 years to talk about these UFO encounters, the Pentagon is finally having public hearings and talking to these missileers that experienced these UFO encounters back in the 1960s. If you want to learn more about the Malmstrom incidents, there's a couple videos on YouTube I'll link down below and refer you to. The incident that's probably the most famous is from March 24th of 1967. Basically, these UFOs would hover over a nuclear silo and enable it. They basically turn the missile on, and the missileers would have to inhibit it to stop it from being active. I don't think it would have launched. The doors weren't open. I don't think there ever would have been a nuclear yield, but if something unexplained is causing missiles to go enable, you might want to investigate that. So on my YouTube channel, I have made a couple videos talking about Bob Lazar. I'll link these two videos down below if you don't know who Bob Lazar is and want to get some information about UFOs. Other than that, I can recommend a book. It's called UFOs and Nukes by Robert Hastings. And this book is 500 pages long, cataloging and chronicling all of the encounters that have occurred between unexplained phenomena and the U.S. nuclear arsenal. The book is 500 pages of incidents. Maybe 90–95% of them are explainable and the information's just classified. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was, swamp gas reflecting off a weather balloon. But my personal belief is that we're not alone in the universe. There are other intelligent, advanced civilizations. They have figured out interstellar travel. They know we're here, and they don't care. They occasionally show up to do some tests, maybe some grad students working on their equivalent of a doctoral thesis on human culture and civilization, but I don't think they interact with us because they probably view us as very primitive. The fact that we build nuclear weapons and point them at each other, as a species, we're not even unified on the planet. We fight with each other. We probably look very barbaric and uncivilized to them. So they don't talk to us, they don't interact with us, but I think they're real, I think they're out there, and hopefully someday the human race can elevate itself to the point where we can join the League of Nations out in the stars. I'm a big Star Trek fan, so I hope there's a federation of peaceful civilizations out there waiting for us to get to the point where we can join them and share the knowledge. All right, that's all for this Q&A. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a question. I appreciate you all every single day. I have the greatest job in the world. This is so much fun. Till the next video, take care, everyone.